So, Ron is the author of a four-book self-esteem and personal growth series that combines real-life experiences, faith, humor, and practical wisdom to help people live more meaningful and fulfilling lives. Drawing from a lifetime of experiences, including military service, travel, family, and overcoming life challenges, Ron shares relatable stories that inspire resilience, purpose, and personal growth. His message is simple. True self-esteem is built through faith, gratitude, action, and embracing the experiences that shape us. Disclaimer. Any of the guidance offered by the podcast host, myself, or the podcast guests is our own guidance. We are not liable for any of the actions the podcast listener decides to do. Welcome to the show today, Ron. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, I started writing self-esteem when I started writing letters to my grandkids. I wanted to pass on to them some of the things I've learned in my life. And as the letters progressed, as they got older, it evolved into a series of books. And then I realized that if I could have a genre with all these combined, it'd be self-esteem. And I feel so strongly about that because I've seen so many cases in my life where people have had low self-esteem and by that had deprived themselves a lot of the richest of lives. And I've seen people with high self-esteem that have really not accomplished much in the way of worldly goods, but somehow they got a handle on life. And they learned that with high self-esteem or good, healthy self-esteem, doors will open that otherwise would have remained shut for them. So I'm a firm believer in that. But when it comes right down to it, it's one of those things that is very, very difficult to really define. It's one of those slogans that you hear often, and it means a little something to you, but not much. And then when you start delving into it, you as a self-esteem is the very fabric of our life. It opens doors. It lets us act differently than maybe we would have if we didn't have self-esteem. So to me, it's the fabric of life, and without it, we just deprive ourselves of a lot of experiences in our lives.
That's interesting. And like you said, I like your point around there's some people who have that like self-esteem and don't necessarily always offer much, but they have such high self-esteem in themselves. But then there can be some other people who want to do a lot of good, but they've got that low self-esteem, so it kind of really holds them back. And I love what you're trying to do in the world to help people really have more self-esteem. And I know it's something you're trying to like leave behind in your journey.
To me, self-esteem is it's a very freedom-giving thing. When you realize, as again, I'm not a professor, I have no advanced degrees. These are just the experience that I've lived and observed. It seems to me that with self-esteem, a healthy self-esteem, you understand that you are not programmed to succeed 100% of the time. You're not programmed to fail 100% of the time. You have a balance of both. And if you truly believe that, as a believer in self-esteem does, that means that when you have setbacks, you just kind of shrug your shoulders, knowing that something better is coming right down the line for you. I remember when my son was on the short list to become president of a university. There was a short list of 10, and then 8, and then 7, and went down to a short list of 3. And then the winner was announced, and it was not my son. And I called him up the next day, and I said, "You lucky son of a gun. If this escapes you, there must be something far better for you waiting. You are so lucky. I envy you so much." That was the message I gave to him, and it proved to be very prophetic. Very shortly, he was in a position where, had he been appointed president, he would not have been able to take part in it. But he was not appointed. He did take part of it, and the rewards are far more numerous than what was originally imagined. So if you can imagine yourself patting yourself on the back when something doesn't go well, knowing that something better is coming along, and makes life so much easier.
Knowing that something else is coming along. I love that. So I love. Was there an event in your life that led you to such an interest in self-image?
I had three events in my life that started everything off, and they all occurred in the Army, and they all occurred within about 3 or 4 months of each other. When I was 19, I joined the Army, and my purpose was to have some adventure in life and see some of the world. We were not at war. That was my only objective. Well, it turned out that um, I was never appointed anywhere after my first year. I thought I was doomed to stay where I was, which is Fort Jackson, South Carolina, for the remaining part of the 3 years. And I was devastated because that's not what I joined for. And one day, a fellow came down enlisting people to enlist for training in the airborne. The airborne was very elite soldiers, and that was never really my idea. But I agreed to sign up the very next morning. I thought maybe that was my way out for adventure and seeing the world. Well, that very afternoon, my orders came down to go to France, which is exactly what I wanted. And then I started looking at the timing element. How could that have happened? After being there for almost a year, waiting and waiting and waiting for it to happen on the very same day that I was going to qualify, I was going to enlist for training, it's just too much of a coincidence that you just can't write off. And then I had another experience where I was, again, as a young soldier, this is probably about 3 or 4 months later, I was stranded in a little town in Germany trying to get back to my base in Metz, France. And I was evicted from a train because I had the wrong ticket, apparently. Didn't speak German, so I didn't know where I was, had no idea what to do. The only thing I could do, I thought, was to hitchhike and leave everything to fate, which I did. I hitchhiked and no one picked me up. Then I had an inspiration to go to another corner and hitchhike. And when I did, I got picked up immediately. I got picked up by an American Army officer going through Germany, through France, going to the exact city I was going to. I thought, what are the odds of that happening? What factors had to be perfectly aligned for me to change the intersections at that precise moment, and then for the driver to be at that exact moment to pick me up? Again, a coincidence that you can't shrug off. And I began to realize that we all have somebody or something looking after us. And I think when you realize that, it makes life so much easier. And I realized that after a while, and I lived my life like that. And those things like that kept occurring for the rest of my life. And it gives you a sense of freedom to know that no matter what happens, you really aren't alone.
So, sorry, a sense of freedom that you are being looked after.
That when you get slapped on the side of your head, there's usually a reason. And I wrote a letter to my grandkids about this very letter called the train ticket story. And the moral of the story was we all are on a journey of some kind, to be a teacher, to be this, to be that, always on a journey. And we get kicked off our journey many, many times. That's just the way of life. And the message I gave to my grandchildren was when you get kicked off your journey, it's because there's a better way for you to get to where you're going, or there's a better destination.
Mm.
And using that as an example, I got kicked off a German train that at that time was kind of stuffy, crowded, had no one with whom to converse, and made constant stops and starts letting people on and off. And when I got picked up after hitchhiking, I got picked up a nice air conditioned car where somebody spoke the same language. I had a nice conversation all the way back, going to the exact place I was going to, and I got there sooner than had I not been kicked off the train. And when you start thinking of things like that, it does make setbacks, which we all have, easier to absorb. So it's a sense of freedom, I think.
Mm, like that sort of something kind of like redirecting us, and yeah, seeing sort of like not those setbacks as stopping you, but kind of maybe a different path.
Yeah, that's basically just exactly it. When you look at all, it's easy to write things off as a coincidence.
Mm,
And when you look at things, for something to happen, several things had to happen before that happened. Now, in the train ticket story, I had to change intersection at that precise moment to catch that ride. If I had done it 30 seconds, well, maybe that's a little bit. If I had done 60 seconds, sooner or later, I would have missed that ride. So what combination of elements had to conspire to have me at that exact time, and for the driver of the fellow that picked me up to be at that intersection at the precise time. The seconds counted. And so when you look at it like that in depth, it's very hard to write things off as a coincidence. And if that's not a coincidence, then what else could it be? So
sure.
it's a way of looking at life that gives you a sense of freedom, I believe. Again, I'm not a learned professor. I have no advanced degrees. This is just my experiences and what I think I've learned in life.
Mm, I like that. But yeah, not just writing things as a coincidence, but kind of seeing that pattern. I love that. Ron, why do you think there there's sort of like we talked about like self-esteem, but why do you think so many people are challenged with having a good relationship with themselves?
Boy, that's the whole ticket to it. Have a relationship with yourself to understand yourself.
Mm,
You know, the Socrates was known for his famous statement, "Know thyself."
mm,
One of those kind of a cliche that goes in one ear and out the other. But when you stop to look at it, my gosh, it's a whole world of exploration. I wrote a series that we are not cardboard caricatures. We have different personas. And a perfect example would be a boxer. He's in a ring and he's superbly conditioned physically to knock out his opponent. It's all aggression. And then you play the clock back maybe a week before that. He's in his home, cradling his new infant daughter, making funny noises, trying to make her smile. The same person, different personas. And I think to know thyself is to understand that you have different personas.
mm,
And knowing that if you let them out every now and then, it makes life richer. And one of them is humor. They have all types of personas. And an example of a humor would be that several years ago, my late wife and I were in a part of the state that we were not familiar with. It was a nice morning, no traffic on this nice country road, beautiful scenery, and I was probably going a lot faster than I intended to. We were talking. I probably just lost track of the speed because there's no one there. Well, actually, there was someone there that I didn't see, and that was a motorcycle police officer. And he saw me, he pulled me over and gave me a good stiff uh, speeding ticket. Well, when I got back to my hometown, I wrote to the county where I got the ticket, and I said, if you look at my driving record, I've had no tickets. This is just an aberration. So I'm not a reckless driver, just kind of lost track of it, wasn't familiar with the roads, etc. So in view of my driving record, can you dismiss the ticket? Well, I waited about 10 days and then called back and they asked for the case number, the ticket number. I gave that to them. And she came back on the phone and said, oh, I'm sorry. We thank you for your safe driving record, but that's not sufficient grounds to dismiss the ticket. The ticket stands. Well, a few days later, I thought, well, if they want better, I can do better. So a little gremlin in me, another persona came out, and I wrote this letter to them. I said, here's what happened. I was speeding on your country road, and a police officer stopped me, leaned into the driver's side, and said, I've been waiting for a speedster like you all day. And I responded, I'm sorry you had to wait so long. I got here as fast as I could. And I wrote that. For some reason, had it notarized and sent it to the court. Well, I waited about 10 days, called up again to see what happened. And they took my number. And the lady came back on the phone laughing. She said, "You're the funny one. We loved it. The judge dismissed the ticket." And that shows so that we have different personas in our life that come up every now and then. And with the healthy self-esteem, you let them come up every now and then.
Mm.
So that's another manifestation of living a life and letting the different personas come into play at the right time. Gives you a sense of freedom.
Mm. I like that. Yeah, having different personas and letting them come out and really, you said, the wasn't it Socrates, know thyself, and really understanding the different parts of you and letting them out. And yeah, I guess some of us hide parts of ourselves, right?
Well, what I have found is that people have self-esteem in a different way. Sometimes it's dependent on another person or another cause. Now, this person that I mentioned to you that uh, her name came up, she had lost her spouse 2 decades before, and her self-esteem apparently was dependent on him. And when he's absent, her self-esteem just kind of collapsed. And she told me in her words that she was leading a very lonely life. And so self-esteem has to come from within as individuals, not as we are related to something else. We may be known for our devotion to a school or to a cause or to another person. But to have self-esteem independently, I think that's where the freedom is. And when I have looked at people uh, in my lifetime, I have found that to be true almost without exception.
Mm. So yeah, just it's not about so it's about coming within. It's not about external things. You're saying it's like something we bring out from ourselves.
Yeah, it is on different veins. I told you a few minutes ago that there were three things that happened to me in the army with a short duration, and the summation of those three things shaped my life. The third thing I didn't tell you yet, and that was when I had a collapsed lung when I first got overseas, and I remember the medic saying to me, "Says you lucky son of a gun, I would give anything to trade places with you. You get to go home." And I remember I joined just to see the world, and this guy was where I wanted to be, and he couldn't wait to get home. And so that was another lesson. Do we accept nature's gifts to us? Here was a guy that was in the same place I was, looking at it completely different. I accepted the gift of being there with open arms. I wanted to see everything that I could, to experience everything I could. And this guy just wanted to go back to his comfort zone, go back home. So the healthy self-esteem gives you more of a receptivity thing. You react to things differently and you receive things differently. You're receptive. And again, in my mind, that makes a huge difference in how you live your life.
Mm. And I know you look at the role of gratitude with self-esteem as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Gratitude is a huge part of it.
Mm.
I wrote a little article one time about the kindly grandfather who gives kids to his grandparents, gives gifts. And he walks by in the evening and the gifts that he gave are still unopened. So he goes by the next evening, they're still unopened. The third time he goes back, they're still unopened. And then I asked the question, if the gifts are unopened, how many times do you think you're going to keep receiving gifts if they're ignored? And the example is this medic that was rejecting the gift of being in a different, exciting place, couldn't wait to get home. In my mind, at that age, that was just rejecting a gift that was given to you. So if you parlay that into a lifetime of potential gifts, To receive more of them just means a richer life. And that, to me, it all comes down to the self-esteem concept. With the healthy self-esteem, you welcome gifts with open arms. With the low self-esteem, you're afraid to do anything new. You want to hasten back to your comfort zone.
I love that. For someone who's maybe, you shared some really good things today, but someone who's really, they feel like they got low self-esteem and they really want to do something about it and they've got no idea where to start, what guidance can you give that individual?
That's the hardest part of all. I know people personally that do a lot with meditation, reading self-help books and that. And for some people, it doesn't seem to register at all. They know the words, but somehow they don't quite believe them.
Mm.
And that's why I related those three things to you in the I experienced as a young man in the military. They cemented my belief and believe in these things, not just reading them, but actually believe in them. And when you actually believe in these things are priceless. I wrote a small article one time on slogans, and what the most popular slogan that we see is "Take time to smell the roses" or something like that. All these slogans, I say, are completely meaningless unless you believe in them. If you believe in them, they become priceless. But most people don't believe in them. They just read them. And an example of that, I worked out in a gym for years, and there's a nice slogan on the wall. I don't exactly what it said, but it was along the way of take the time to smell the roses type of thing. And all the time I was at the gym working out right near that slogan, I never saw one person stop and read it. Not one. We're inundated with these slogans. But if you adopt one and truly believe in it, that's where your self-esteem comes from, I believe.
Mm. So
An
not
uneducated person just dwelling on experiences.
sure. So yeah, rather than having so many set sayings and slogans and just reading them again and again, picking one and really getting in your system, believing it.
Well, the example I gave you of my son when he lost out on the position of becoming a president of a university, that could be a devastating blow.
Mm.
And we're both looking at it and say, this is so great. If you missed out on that, think of the size of what's waiting for you. It'll dwarf that. And if you truly believe it, which he did, he got it in short order, actually.
Mm.
So it's the whole thing is when you become a believer when you have a good, healthy self-esteem.
Okay. But to develop the self-esteem for someone, you need to really start believing in yourself. Is that what you're saying?
And that's the hardest thing to do.
Mm.
Yeah, I can remember my career was in insurance. I can remember going to seminars where there's a very gifted motivational speaker, and you felt like $1 million when you left the auditorium. Boy, you felt great, and then you get to your car, and all of a sudden you can't get out because you're hemmed in, and then you start to leave the parking lot, and it's a slow process, and everything seems to go wrong. You're low on gas. You should have got gas where you went. And all of a sudden, all the good feelings that you had from that one speech start
Mm.
to evaporate because things start to go wrong immediately afterwards. And so, when you believe in something, you shrug these things off. If you don't really believe, they become devastating blows to you.
Mm. So really trying to embed belief into your system is a key thing.
One of the chapters in one of the books I have was called "The Leaking Barrel,"
Mm.
and the leaking barrel is on the premise that when you wake up in the morning, you're full of confidence. Your ego is very high. You're going to whip the world. Everything's going great. And then you get up to your car and you think, hey, I thought my car was in better shape than this. It's pretty dirty. Oh, I should have filled up on gas. and then somebody cuts you off, gives you the famous middle finger, and one thing after another, and pretty soon this barrel of great ego that you had starts to dissipate little by little by little. And so the whole idea of that is you need a way to keep that barrel replenished. And that's where belief comes in. Where when something aggravating happens to you shrug it off because you know that something better is right down the road for you.
Mm. Okay, so yeah, I'm just thinking for the individual who's really like hearing this, they're like, yeah, I know I've got to believe, I know I've got to have high self-esteem, but they're just really stuck trying to do that. Um, yeah, it's just, I guess it's just a practice, really.
You know, if I were a consultant, which I'm not, if I were, I would encourage people to look at those three incidents I had in the army and see if they didn't find incidents just like that in their
Mm,
life, because I truly believe that we all have them.
mm,
And some people take them and live a life based on them. Some people just ignore them. But I'll bet you that most of your listeners, if not all of them, can look back and say, oh, yeah, this happened. And because of that, this happened. And because of that, this happened.
mm,
And pretty soon, you have a whole new realm of thinking. And that is the birth, I belief of high self esteem.
mm. So yeah, just looking at things working out in your favour, even if they don't seem it on first appearance, as you said, like in the army incident there, which is a key one. Wow. So yeah, like Ron, how love to hear a little bit about your books. I know you've mentioned them a couple of times, but yeah, I'd love to hear all these books that you've written.
The website where the books are is just one word. It's ronmillicent.com. And all the books are there. In fact, there are two more books coming out. So everything is based on, we all have our individual journeys. The journeys change. And one thing is for certain, that we'll be kicked off our train, just like I was, probably many times before our destination is reached. And the whole idea of self-esteem is you shrug off the fact that you kicked off, you get back on another conveyance and works out better than ever.
Mm. Shrug it off, and you get back on. You were directed to another journey, like you said, um, in that sense.
Well, the whole idea is you either there's a better way to get to where you were going, or there's a better destination. And
Mm,
if you truly believe that, which is a outgrowth of a good, healthy self-esteem, I have no doubt that happens over and over again.
mm. I love the idea behind that. So yeah, Ron, the best place for the listener to find you is your website, right? At
Yes,
Ron Millicent. Okay, and they can find all your books there.
yes, it's ronmillicent.com. That's where all the books are. And again, there's two more coming.
Mm, amazing.
It's just a lighthearted romp through life. I have read many articles on self-confidence and self-esteem, and I'm sure they're all factually correct, and I'm sure there's no errors at all in them, but I found them to be kind of scholarly and hard to relate to. So these books are just kind of a lighthearted romp through life, how you can turn things into your advantage and have a little chuckle while you're doing it. Like in the case of the parking ticket.
Mm,
So life is not as hard as a lot of people think it is. They just think it differently. The person I know that has the highest self-esteem has really done nothing remarkable. Never ran a company, never created this, never discovered that, but she knows who she is, and her life is incredibly satisfying. And just because of her attitude, her self-awareness, she knows who she is, doesn't try to be anybody else. And that to me is a very successful person.
that's awesome. I love that. Knowing who she is and not needing all these things that we're always chasing, but just knowing who she is. I love that. I think that was a really good point to leave for the listener today. Ron, we're going to link your website so the listener can get in touch with your materials, with your books, and all the work you're doing. As we wrap up today, you shared many great points. Is there any final words you wanted to share with us today?
Yeah, that's the website, and I appreciate the time with you, Johnny.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, thank you as well. You've given us some really good points to look at when, especially when life is appearing challenging, and your perspective's great. And Ron's work is on his website, and you can find that linked in the show notes below this episode. So click there to grab his books and more of his work. So once again, a final thank you for you today, Ron.
Well, it's been a pleasure visiting with you.
Absolutely. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.